Okay, George, take it away.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks everybody for attending tonight, and also be aware that this is available on YouTube as a recorded meeting. So if you missed the event tonight, you can log on to the Libertarian Party of Orange County's Facebook or YouTube channel and catch this. So just a quick introduction. I'm George Reis with the Libertarian Party of Orange County and the Huntington Beach Liberty Club. About a month and a half ago, I asked Judge Gray if he would be interested in giving a online presentation to us about the basics of libertarian viewpoints. And he said, why don't we make it a series? So I jumped at the opportunity. Thank you so much again, Judge Gray, for agreeing to do that. And this is week number 3 of a 5-part series, and our topic is going to war. I think that's gonna bring up a lot of interesting issues. So Jim, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, and George, and thank you. And thanks to our guests who are sharing the Tuesday evenings with us. So we're on every Tuesday in September. I also thank certainly man behind the scenes. Michael is helping all of this, and David, you helped set this up, and all of you, just thank you. To introduce myself again, I'm Judge Jim Gray. I was a trial court judge here in Orange County for 25 years and retired 11 and a half years ago. As I tell people in my mediations, I became a judge when I was 12 years old. That's why I'm still so young. I don't allow any questioning on that issue at all. You accept that and we'll get along just fine. But yes, libertarian causes are close to my heart. Mostly, I'm not doctrinaire because our philosophy, our approaches, our values work. And I care about things that work. I'm an enormous fan of Milton Friedman's, who said numbers of things, but one of them is we should judge our programs by the results, not their good intentions. We were just to do that, it would change, be a revolution positively for our country. But we're here to talk about libertarian issues. The first session we talked as kind of an introduction, kind of an overview. Last week we talked about school choice, which is a huge issue, totally down the alley of libertarians, that we believe in empowering parents to choose where their government money is going to be spent for the education of their children, with the understanding that parents know a lot more about how their children should be educated than governments do. And then today we're going to talk about going to war. War is probably the most important decision that a government can make. You go to war, it has all kinds of ramifications, and I don't need to go into that. You understand that. The founders, and again, I don't see founding fathers because there were numbers of women as well, but the founders understood that completely, and they wanted protections of all things. So they put it in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution that we will only go to war, and it's since then been resolved a little bit, more than 60 days, unless there is what? A declaration of war from Congress. Now, I'm going to give you my libertarian thoughts, but nobody speaks for the Libertarian Party, and I certainly don't purport to do that either. These are my thoughts, but I think that many people would agree, certainly with regard to the declaration of war. That's just up and down libertarian. But if you want to get a little more of my insights as to what libertarian values and approaches would do, and go to my website, which is judgejimgray.com, G-R-A-Y, judgejimgray.com, and click on some articles. And one of them is One Man's Libertarian White Paper. And that talks about these issues, and I'm just proud of that. Feel free to plagiarize it all you want, Joe Biden notwithstanding, but feel free, because these are ideas that we need to get out there for discussion. But with regard to going to war, only Congress can do this. However, we've had an abrogation of responsibility by Congress. They have, as we have seen, given that power to the president. Now, it began with 9/11, 2001, just a little while ago, 19 years ago, but they gave what I will call, in fact, I will read it to you, an authorization for use of military force grant to the executive branch. This was passed just a week after 9/11 of 2001. And that allowed the president, the executive, to, quote, use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, or persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11, 2001, or harbored such organizations or persons. That's called a blank check. Now, most of us are old enough to remember 9/11. It was 19 years ago. And what happened? The CIA knew who Osama bin Laden was and the rest of that, but okay, I understand that we were reacting. Let's get those people. Let's find out what happened. But look, it's Congress that has that obligation, has that authority only. And that was an abrogation of that authority. What they should have done was saying, Mr. President, you find out who did this, what happened, you come to us, you tell us who the threat is, who the people are, what the goal is, and then we will issue a declaration of war, go at them. But they didn't do that. So as a fallback position, without abrogating all responsibility, and I understand that they didn't know what was happening so much, they could have and should have put a time limit on it. Okay, 6 months, then come back to us and we'll see if we redo it again. Then, by the way, with Iraq, how Iraq was involved in 9/11, of course, was proved not to be true, but they augmented this in 2002 and allowed the executive branch to use real force against Iraq, gave them a blank check. Now, we all know once again that there are results from going to war. So it matters. If you're going to require Congress to take a position, I guarantee you that before we go into Vietnam or Afghanistan or Bosnia or Panama or wherever we have sent our troops, Congress will debate this publicly. The founders were brilliant about this. Now, they didn't know television, but the rest, but they knew that in order for me as a member of Congress to put my vote on this, I'm going to make full sure that this is appropriate. So, Mr. President, who's the enemy? We would demand that we know. Who's the enemy? Where is the enemy? What is the threat to our nation's security? What is the threat to our national interests? And we will debate this. We'll put it on C-SPAN now. We'll do all of this. What is our goal? What is our strategy? How will we know when we've met our goals so we can know we can bring the troops home? That will inherently happen if we send to Congress a debate on whether to vote yes or no about declaring war. But if that doesn't happen, then we don't get into that. We have been in Afghanistan, what, since 2002? We're still in Afghanistan. Let me ask you a question that you will not be able to answer. What are our goals in Afghanistan today? Are we better toward accomplishing those goals today than we were a year ago or 10 years ago? We're just there, and it's out of control. And it was inherent. It was an institution that could have kept this from happening. Now, libertarians believe live and let live. And part of our doctrine is don't tread on me, don't tread on anybody. But I don't think there are very many pacifists that are libertarians. As I was saying a little bit earlier before we came on here, don't tread on me. If you tread on the United States of America, I promise you, under a libertarian approach, you'll wish you had not. And there are times in which we will send our troops various places with the understanding that we have these goals. We believe in free trade, we believe in freedom of the seas, these various things. The Libertarian Party, mark my words, I believe that the Libertarian Party is the only mainstream party in the United States of America today politically. And we are the only ones that represent our fighting troops, our men and women in uniform that we send off into battle. And we have an obligation to them before we send them into battle that they should know, be assured that this is in our national interest. And this has not happened. I suppose, I purport that we never would have gone into Vietnam had we had required a declaration of war from Congress. Yes, we had the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which in many ways I believe was based upon fraud as to that attack on our ship in the South China Sea. But one way or the other, I don't think we certainly would not be in Afghanistan still today. There was a man I actually have a podcast. It's called All Rise, the Libertarian Way with Judge Jim Gray. It's on the Voice America Network. And on the 19th of July of last year, 2019, we had a man by the name of Scott Horton as our guest. who wrote a book called Fool's Errand. And this opened my eyes to a lot of things. And he documented, boy, he had footnotes all over the place. And he showed how the CIA actually somehow tricked the then Soviet Union to going into Afghanistan. We had our Vietnam, and they tricked the Soviet Union into going into Afghanistan. We, in effect, empowered Osama bin Laden and folks like that, gave them war material, etc. And we caused, in effect, that was the beginning of the fall of the Soviet Union. This man, Scott Horton's book, said, as his theory, that Osama bin Laden saw how well that worked against the Soviet Union, and he was from Saudi Arabia, as we know. He didn't care less about the United States of America, but he saw it as blasphemy to have our troops in Saudi Arabia or in that part of the world, in the Middle East. So he tricked us to going into Afghanistan. How? By organizing this. He, of course, put his henchmen, his Al-Qaeda folks, in Afghanistan. It wasn't the Afghan government that did this, but they kind of condoned it. They knew that Osama bin Laden was there. And then he sent those airplanes into the Twin Towers and into the Pentagon. And he tricked us into going into Afghanistan. And this book just continued to do that. I suggest to you that had we had requirement of a declaration of war, we would not have been tricked. We would have gone in, found Osama bin Laden, brought him to justice, did away with him, whatever, and then pulled our troops out. There was a man also on our show, Tom Campbell, a wonderful man, a former member of Congress for 5 terms, state senate, actually was the dean of the law school at Chapman University, dean of the business school at Cal. And he was on our show on the 15th of May, and of 2020, and he said on our show, when he was in Congress, this is when Bill Clinton was talking about putting our troops into Afghanistan. In fact, they were there. He introduced 2 resolutions to Congress. Number 1 was, let's give a declaration of war for our troops to be in Bosnia. And the second was, if there is not a declaration of war, let's withdraw our troops from Bosnia. Makes sense to me. Perfect libertarian idea under the Constitution. And then he said, deeply troubling. He was approached, he was a Republican at the time. He was approached by high-ranking Democrats saying, look, you folks, the Republicans, you had your war in Vietnam. Let us have our war in Bosnia. You let us alone. Withdraw those resolutions. And the Republicans came to him and said, wait a minute, we took a shellacking from Vietnam. This is the Democratic war. If they're successful and we give them authorization, we can claim credit. And if they're not successful, we can then blame them. It was all political. Are we sending our troops into harm's way, into battle for political reasons? These are things that we need to address, and they will be addressed by the libertarian approach of a declaration of war. Now, before I keep going, remember that we were interested in asking questions. And I've asked Michael, who is our kind of behind the scenes producer here, if he has questions that come in on the subject that we're discussing, break in, ask them, but send Michael some questions. And by the way, also, we've done it twice already, and I continue to make the offer that the best question of the evening, and I determine that, I'll be the judge of this sort of thing. I will donate one of my 2 books, or one of my 2 books. One of them is 2 Paragraphs for Liberty, Solutions that are Effective, Responsible, and libertarian. And the other is a voter's handbook. So you tell us effective solutions to America's problems. You tell us and give Michael your address. And if you are the asking of the best question for the evening, I will send you one of my books autographed, just to encourage this form of discussion. So we have our military and our military families. And I deeply believe, like I said or tried to say earlier, that the Libertarian Party is the only party in politics today that represents the fighting troops that we have. What happens if we send our troops into battle? Yes, some people die. Other people, of course, are scarred for life. And candidly, I think that our military does a really first-rate job. If you lose your leg or you're shot or whatever, I think you get pretty first-rate treatment, the MASH units, whatever, when you're on the battlefield and thereafter. But once you're discharged or you're sent over to the Veterans Administration, it truly falls off. And if you're If you have an amputated limb, that's visible. I think you get pretty good treatment even at the VA. But if you have, they used to call it shell shock. Now they call it PTSD. But, you know, what would it think? Imagine if you were walking and fighting with your best friend, and your best friend all of a sudden was shot, sitting right next to you. You'd go through the rest of your life thinking, why was it him? Why wasn't it me? You know, you will have those emotional scars forever. The domestic violence goes up with veterans for many reasons because of these issues. We have an absolute obligation to help our vets. They have done this in our name, and it's a huge breach of contract in my view, and I think in many libertarians' views. We owe them the best. And as far as the VA is concerned, let's just turn that into kind of an insurance agency where our veterans can go and seek the treatment that they really wish they could have, and they can be funded by the VA, probably do away with the Veterans Administration hospitals, et cetera, and just be able to have them be treated in the private sector. As you know, the homeless issues, I think something on the order in California, in San Francisco, Los Angeles, probably 30% of the homeless are veterans. There has to be a connection. All of this is a result of these needless wars that were caused without a declaration of war. The same thing with regard to the families. The same thing with regard to suicides. These are issues that we simply must address, and they are not being addressed today. In addition, I think it was Ron Paul, it was probably 10 years ago, so maybe it's dated, but he said that there is something on the order of the United States has 400 military reservations in other countries around the world. 400. Now, you know, in the 1950s, maybe the world was a little bit different. 1960s, maybe we needed those various bases, but under libertarian government, we will conduct an audit. Simply ask the military, which of these military reservations do you need or not need? And if you don't need them, then as long as we're not breaking contracts or peace treaties or the rest, close them down. Bring our troops home. And I suggest to you that we'll be even a lot more safe than we are if we close some of those military reservations. I suggest of those 400, about 60-day audit would determine that we could close 300 of them without even breaking stride. And then we could look at the other hundreds and see which are needed. I think we certainly are committed to the freedom of the seas, and if we need foreign bases, foreign ports in order to do that, to do our part, not control it all, we're not the world's policemen, but to do our part, we should keep those open. But let's look at those military reservations and start closing them and bringing the troops home. And as I explain it, I love New Zealand. I love New Zealanders. I think it's a neat country, and the people I think are really first rate. But what if New Zealand had a naval air station 10 miles away from my home? And pretty soon, you know, those low-flying airplanes would be kind of noisy, and sometimes their troops would get drunk and maybe pick on some of our women or whatever else. I'd stop liking New Zealanders quite so much. Do you think that's happened with regard to the United States of America all around the world? And I suggest that that is something we should consider. I suggest that this is accurate. So we should look at those various foreign reservations. Same thing in the United States. You know, we had an Air Force base in near Sacramento that was closed recently, and all the people there were concerned because the economy is going to go down. No, if you look at it 5 years later, the private sector has taken over that land. They're getting more revenues. The economy is doing very well there. So let's talk to the military. It's a very political issue. If I'm a member of Congress from Oklahoma or from Arkansas or from Maryland, whatever, I want to have these bases there politically. Oh, it's a scar on me if during my watch, we allow this naval station to uproot and leave. But no, let's talk to the military and see from their standpoint, professionally, which of the military reservations they actually need. These are things that libertarian governments would do. So what are the costs of war? In Iraq, just in Iraq, which in my view is the biggest mistake of my lifetime. I was actually campaigning for US Senate at the time, 2004, when we were talking about going into Iraq. I said, if we do that, it will be the biggest mistake of my lifetime, and nothing has happened since that time to change my mind. There were hundreds of thousands of people that are dead because we went into Iraq that would otherwise still be alive. Let me be clear. Saddam Hussein was a bad guy, and he did some bad things to his people, no question about it. But, you know, the electricity at least was running. He gassed the Kurds. I understand that. But weapons of mass destruction, no declaration of war. I think our government knowingly lied to us at the end with regard to knowing that Saddam Hussein did not have weapons of mass destruction. We also have these things. Profit. Remember Plan Colombia? This is back again with President Clinton. Plan Colombia was with regard to the war on drugs, separate issue, and you probably know my position with regard to that. But Plan Colombia, President Clinton decided we're going to really get tough and fighting those, eradicating those coca leaves for cocaine down in Colombia. So we're going to spend $1 billion on Plan Colombia. And Congress, not to be outdone politically, oh, no, that's not enough. They voted $2 billion to go down to Colombia and fight this war on drugs with Plan Colombia. And one of the deals was they're going to send the government of Colombia 50 Sikorsky helicopters in order to fight the war on drugs. And you may have heard this, you may remember it, you may not, but the government of Colombia protested. No, we can't use 50 helicopters. We don't have any hangars. We don't have any pilots. But Sikorsky, when you used this money, Sikorsky actually ended up getting a lot of money from Plan Colombia. So I know that there's a lot of that connected. I know that we have arms manufacturers that are making a whole lot of money when the United States of America sends its troops in to go to war in Bosnia or Panama, remember, to get out Noriega or Vietnam or the rest. I know that there are all of these theories. But if you go back to the Constitution, remember the Constitution, and you adopt what our founders had there, requiring a declaration of war, we will obviate to a major degree those problems. So these are things that we just need to look at. The veterans, again, physical injuries, fine. If they are, however, involved with mental problems, and they are. The PTSD is real. I just can't conceive of being able to go through your life as it was before without, having had these shocks to your system. We simply must do away with these things. So again, I'm looking for your questions. I think some of these things, I don't think they should be controversial, but maybe they are. But sound off. What do you think with regard to this? The United States is maintaining our troops in wars in Yemen. I mean, they're all over the world. Is these things that are profiting the United States? Who is our enemy? Why are they there? Candidly, I think there's some circumstances in which, and Bosnia could have been one of them, in which you're not a moral human being. If you have the ability of stopping a pogrom, stopping bloodshed, just wanted, people were being shot and killed because they were Muslim or because they were Hindu or wherever else. If that is happening and you can effectively do something about it, I think we should galvanize the world community under the United Nations or otherwise, and I think we should do something about it. That's my personal opinion. As long as we will be effective, as long as we figure out what is the goal, how will we be there, how will we then be an ed strategy, not going into nation building, not changing everybody's hope, putting democracy in Vietnam or the rest. But these are things, again, that we just need to look at.
Would you like to take some questions?
Yeah, please. That's fine. I have another issue
Okay.
to go into, but now's a good time to break, Michael.
Okay,
what are the
perfect.
questions that we have?
So the first question is from Howard Hinman, and he says, Randolph Bourne said, war is the health of the state, and he wonders what you think about that.
There is something to be said, Howard. We were in a depression before Pearl Harbor. And I tell you, the government spending, and they had ran into deficits and the rest, it brought us out of the depression. That's a separate issue, by the way. I think that the FDR and his New Deal kept us in the depression much longer than if we just backed off, but that's off the subject. But there is an argument to be made that it stimulates the economy. Yes, more employment, the rest of that, but is that a reason to be at war? Is that a reason to put our troops in various places? The answer is no, but there certainly does stimulate the economy, Howard. You cynic, but I think you're right.
Alrighty. Then another one from Howard. Are you able to address the allegations that the real reason the USA forces are in Afghanistan is to protect the drug trade?
I don't think that's true. One of the ironies is that in Afghanistan, they lead the world in the opium poppy, raising the opium poppy, which is used to make heroin. And as I understand it, from the FBI was telling the CIA that, hey, now that we're in Afghanistan, we have our troops there, we need to close down those fiefdoms. And, you know, basically Afghanistan is tribal. They have warlords, they have lords, and they have tribes, and pretty much they don't get along with each other. They hate each other in a lot of ways. The only time they get together is when you have a foreign invader coming in, and then they unify to kick out the foreign invader, which now happens to be us. But there was a time, I think this was actually in Mr. Horton's book as well, if I'm not mistaken, but he was saying that we were there eradicating the opium poppies from a drug lord there, however, or warlord, but he was supporting us. He was helping with the government in Kabul, and so we actually instructed the Marines to protect his poppy fields because he was helping us with regard to the war. Talking about an irony, you had United States Marines protecting poppy fields so that these warlords could sell heroin. I don't think that is the reason that we are there. However, a little off the subject still, Howard, but if we were to change or away from drug prohibition, who would the winners be, or the losers? Who is winning today with regard to the war on drugs? I have 6 groups, and I'm going to get to this in a minute. But the first group, of course, are big-time drug dealers, you know, Mexican drug cartels and the rest. The other are juvenile street gangs that are making huge amounts of money selling illegal drugs. The third are the police that, in fact, have a partnership with the bad guys. Now, they're doing a fine job. I'm not pointing the finger at them, but they're getting ever-increasing funding by fighting against the first 2 groups. The fourth group are politicians that vote in favor of yet more draconian sentences. They get reelected by doing it. The fifth group are the private sector that make money because of increased crime. Who is that? Well, people in the prison guards union, people that sell burglar alarm equipment, security service, that sort of thing. But the reason I'm bringing this up, the sixth group are the terrorists around the world. You know, almost every terrorist organization, Osama bin Laden down, gets most of their funding from the sale of illegal drugs. And I feel if our government really cared about fighting terrorism, they would adopt the one thing that would take away the funding from terrorism. It would be the most effective thing that we could do. And we don't even seem to care about it because we don't even discuss that. So yes, the war on drugs, illegal drugs, fund Osama bin Laden's of this world big time. But so yes, Howard, as you say, everything is connected, but I don't think that we are in Afghanistan because of the drug war. That's
all right,
long
answer,
but yes.
Then we have a question from John Alpe. Do you view the War Powers Act as being inconsistent with the Constitution?
Hands down, flat out, yes. It is an abrogation. And in fact, you may know I was running for the nomination for Libertarians for President. And I said that I will be the first president of the United States that voluntarily gives power back to Congress, that we will not accept a war powers resolution. If you do this without a declaration of war, it will be ineffective, that we will put these back where they belong, because there's a huge difference between giving the president authority to do what he, maybe eventually she, wants to do, Joe Jorgensen, whatever, wants to do. That's a much different situation than I, as a member of Congress, am going to put my name, my vote on this declaration of war. I'm going to be full sure that we know what the threat is, who the bad players are, who the enemies are, what our goals are, and the rest. So the answer to that question, I feel deeply, if the founders were here today, they would be really upset with us. They take up arms against that. It was totally against the Constitution, was then, is now, will be. So the answer, John, to your question is categorically yes, it is an unconstitutional action. Other than that,
right.
I have no opinion whatsoever.
From Carrie Cannon, what entitlements do we owe veterans?
Karen, let's not be naive, you know, not a wholesale everything, but I would change the requirements. Today, if I'm a veteran, it's my obligation to show that my malady, my upset, my mental disorder was attached to my government service, my military service. I think that should be changed to require the government to show that it was not. I think the biggest breach of contract I can think of in existence in the United States of America today is our government as opposed to our veterans. That there are veterans that are suffering, and that is simply flat out wrong. Now, to give them a blank check because, oh, you were a veteran and you played the organ in Kansas City while you were in the Army for 3 years, no. So let's not be naive, but we need to address these problems, and if it's close, give the benefit of the doubt to the veteran. So to that degree, yes, Karen, I agree.
All right, and then we have one from Charles McGlon. Joe Jorgensen today announced amnesty for Edward Snowden and all whistleblowers now in prison. What would that do for the transmission of information to the American people?
Charles, life is complicated. I'm sorry to be so blunt. You heard it here first. Edward Snowden was a downright hero, and he was also a goat, in my opinion. If you go back to Daniel Ellsberg, and this may be before your time, Charles, I don't know how far back you go. Charles Ellsberg showed us during the Vietnam War that the Pentagon was lying to us. And he disclosed, just like Snowden did, disclosed secret papers that was a violation of law, and he stayed here to face the consequences. That makes him a flat-out hero, in my view. Edward Snowden did one thing that was absolutely wonderful for our country, which was disclosing what was going on with regard to the government harvesting of this information. Thank you, Mr. Snowden. Thank you for doing that, and that deserves amnesty. That deserves accolades. However, he didn't go through it enough, sift through it, such that he did disclose some information that put some of our CIA agents at risk. And that is treasonous in my standpoint. And he fled to China or Russia or wherever else. So he didn't face the consequences. So it's a balance. All things considered, he's paid a price. I think that Dr. Jorgensen's is probably a good idea. My running mate, by the way, Larry Sharp, has Snowden's picture in behind him. He's an absolute hero to Larry Sharp, and I give great value to Larry Sharp's opinion. So I support it, but not wholeheartedly. Let me sneak in, Michael, if I may. And those are really good questions, and I appreciate questions. I don't have all the answers. I keep proving that every time I open my mouth, I suppose, but we should foster discussion. During our nomination process and our debates, I was involved in numbers of AMAs, they were called. What is that? Ask me anything. And that's what we should be doing here. Again, if I don't know an answer, I try to say so. And I'm interested in getting your responses to these various issues so that we can discuss them. But these are things that I don't think that President Trump will ever be in an AMA in this election campaign. I don't think that Vice President Biden will be either. In fact, I don't think there'll even be a debate. I think Biden will figure out 17 different creative ways as to how he cannot debate Trump. But there's another issue. Now, I talked about closing down various military reservations around the world and even here. There's a tangential issue with that as well. Are you aware, because you may not be, today, the United States government owns something on the order of 85% of all of the land in Nevada. I think this is the biggest one. In California, I don't know what the percentage is, at least 30%, probably almost 40% of all of the land in California is still owned by the federal government. It should be given back to the states with, by the way, from my standpoint, the encouragement to have the states auction off maybe 10% of this property every year for 10 years. So auction it off to the private sector. And if you get into that, I ask the question, who takes better care of a house, an owner or a renter? And the answer to that is pretty easy. If you own it, you take better care of it. Who takes better care of grazing land? Somebody that owns it or somebody that's leasing it, particularly in their last 6 months? They might as well overgraze it at all because why not? You don't bear the consequences. So I think that the private sector should take back this land. Now, the Bureau of Land Management oversees these properties. I think any property pretty much by the Bureau of Land Management should be looked at with an eye toward giving it back to, it's mostly in the western states, Montana, Wyoming, California, New Mexico, wherever, and that it should be given back to the states. End of discussion. Now, I'm not talking about national parks. I'm not talking about national forests. I'm not talking about military reservations, but anything overseen by the Bureau of Land Management, I think this should be taken away. This is something I think all libertarians would agree with, more local control. And if you want to put, I know you're concerned, oh, I'm going to buy this forest and then I'm going to strip it, or I'm going to buy a area and have a strip mine there. You can have conditions. You can do that, and that is fine for environmental protections. But again, I think these are how libertarians are totally different than the other parties. The other parties are in war. I go back to the main thesis of what we're talking about here. You know, you talk about, President Trump talked about when he was campaigning, oh, we're going to bring the troops home. We're going to stop these unnecessary wars. Has he? He's building down the forces in Afghanistan. He's been in office for what, 3.5, almost 4 years. How much has he really done? The libertarians would do this. Joe Jorgensen would do this. I would do this. Most libertarians would do this. This is something that sets us apart for all of these reasons that we're talking about. So again, you know, I don't have all the answers. They're complicated issues. Going to close a military reservation? Well, do we have a lease? Well, you know, maybe we could renegotiate it. Do we have a treaty? All that sort of thing. But do we really need tens of thousands of troops today in Germany? Do we really? Do we really? If we do, okay, fine, let's keep them. I don't think so. I think the odds are strong. I congratulate President Trump for requiring the other countries of the world to pay their share of NATO. I think that's fine, and we would certainly do that as well. But these are things that we need to look at, and it's not politics. It's going to be government. It's going to be responsibility. Did I need to say that word again? Responsibility is one of the key values the libertarians have, and it's seldom seen anywhere else. Michael, any further questions? How are we doing?
Yes, we have a few more here. From George Reis, should there be a requirement for all 18-year-olds to register for military service, and what would be the justification for a draft, if anything?
George, I think that the draft is not something that we should have in a libertarian world. I think that the military should pay its own way. In a lot of ways, it's a really valuable and wonderful thing to join the military, particularly after high school. You know, you can get an education. You have 20 years. You can have a retirement. But no, I would not have a draft. I think that is contrary to my views of what of a free society should be. We should not bring these people in. On the other hand, by the way, if you were drafting members of Congress's children, that probably would restrict the number of times that we'd put our troops into war. But nonetheless, the answer to your question is no. In my world, I think in a libertarian world, we would have we would not have a draft. We would have a pay-as-you-go and make the pay its own.
All right,
that's one of the few things I think I've said tonight that should not be particularly controversial.
We have one from Chad Lonsky. In regards to closing unneeded military bases and installations at home and abroad, how would one bypass the perceived local public benefit politically?
That's a real problem, Chad, and it's a political world. I tried to touch on that earlier. And I assume that you're talking about domestically. Yes, if I am a member of Congress from South Carolina or anywhere, no, I want to keep, I'll vote to do away with the military reservations in Montana, but as long as you keep the ones in South Carolina or wherever I'm from. And then, of course, the members of Congress from Montana and South Carolina join together, and so I'll vote against yours closing down if you vote against mine. What you need to do is publicize information, honest information, by the way. And so when you get this information from the military, see what their needs are, see what the expenses are, and then show them how, like I tried to say earlier with regard to that Air Force base close to Sacramento, that now they're thriving more economically than they even were before. So you need to get into education. You know, that's a strange word in today's world. But you need to put honest information out there. And if you do that, the local people in politics will understand it. Okay, if we close this military reservation, we're not going to go into the tank economically, and we'll open up for other endeavors. They'll actually be better off than they were before. But that's called politics. You've got to put honest information out there without having people demagogue it, which is going on all the time today.
All right. Let me go back here. Also from Howard Hinman, is the Veterans Administration the most inept federal agency?
Oh, Howard, that's an unfair question. There's so many competing agencies for that title, and the answer is I don't know. I'm not that conversant. I think that the VA tries. I think that they have a mandate. I think that they try to keep in with it. Funding is always a problem. They're huge resources. Gosh, you go to the VA facility in Los Angeles or in Long Beach or elsewhere. They're not hurting for land, but you know, it's a bureaucracy. Think of it this way. If you're in the government sector, you don't take responsibility, you don't pay a penalty for making bad economic decisions, only bad political decisions. We're seeing that today with the COVID virus and stuff. But if you're in the private sector, you actually thrive by seeing a problem, addressing the problem, and beating it, defeating it. So to give you an example, if you are interested in the welfare state, and you're in government, hey, I'm doing a better job today than I did last year, because today I'm servicing 600 mentally disabled people, where last year I was only servicing 300. So I'm doing a better job. Okay, that's the political standard. If you're in the private sector, you're going to say, hey, I'm a success because last year I was serving 300 mentally disabled people. This year I'm only serving 200 because I've been able to wean other ones off. They're progressing. They're getting better. That's what the private sector will do. They will address the issue. They will try to overcome it. The public sector tries to increase the size of bureaucracy. So the Veterans Administration is probably more successful today in their minds because they're addressing more people's problems today than they were last year. It's just a different concept. If you take the VA and turn it into, in effect, a big insurance brokerage, where, okay, you're a veteran, this is your problem, you go to this doctor, and we will, in effect, pay the doctor. Maybe you'll have a copay, because I think copays are important to make sure that the incentives are where they should be. But not have people come to the Veterans Administration hospitals, but to be able to go to the private sector and just have the VA, in effect, pay them for that. That would reduce the size of the number of employees of the VA by, what, 80%? And it would increase the service by, another 80%. So that's where I would go. I'm not castigating the VA. I think within their boundaries, they're doing a good job, but they're underfunded, and it's just the system. It's not guaranteed. It's not addressing the needs. It's addressing politics. But thank you for that, Howard. You're asking good questions. Howard, today, in fact, you are asking the best question so far. At this point, Howard, I designate you to be the winner of my 2 books. Talk to Michael here and give him your address wherever you wish me to mail it, and it'll be in the mail tomorrow if you give me that address. Thank you, Howard, for your questions.
Would you like to take some more?
Certainly, please.
All right, I have another one from Howard. Is the true danger the entangling alliances as cautioned against by George Washington?
George Washington was brilliant. George Washington was right. I'm not an isolationist. I think most people on the outside think that the libertarians are isolationists, and I really don't think we are. We should have some treaties, I believe, but many fewer, and many fewer foreign entanglements. We should organize our forces for American purposes, but We're human. As I tell people, I was in the Peace Corps, Howard, I care about people. And the United States of America, we care about people. And if there are things going on in the world that are harming other people, or even, you know, if people are poaching rhinoceroses, and we can do something about it to achieve that, these are things that we all want to do. But we shouldn't have foreign entanglements such that we are committed in advance to putting troops into harm's way. So George was right on that and several other things. I think he was a true hero in our country.
We have another one from Howard. What can be done to get pork reduced, especially military bases, and promote free enterprise?
Education. There's no substitute for honest information out into the marketplace, Howard. And it's not a lose-lose situation. If in fact we show that closing this military reservation will not adversely affect our security interests, and it also will turn back this military reservation to the people, to the local governments, and show them how it's worked in the past, people will go along with it. You know, it's seen as, again, if I'm a member of Congress and I lose this military reservation, yes, paying a lot of people a lot of money, it's employing a lot of people. So it's seen as a political defeat. What you need to show is how it's not a political defeat, so that you show, first of all, how the military, we really don't need Los Alamitos former Air Force Station anymore, or wherever it happens to be. I'm just choosing one at random. And that it would instead, hey, that's valuable property. We can get a lot of sales taxes by putting in other housing or neighborhoods or shopping malls or whatever it happens to be. It's an educational process. And I think the education and the facts speak well for what we're talking about.
All right. My computer would let me get back to the questions. There we go. Another one from Howard. Is the current alienation of Venezuela the largest foreign policy fiasco of the current regime?
The alienation of Venezuela. Venezuela is a basket case, which is simply an unnecessary tragedy. It's a political tragedy inflicted upon them, in my view, by Maduro and that sort of thing. Was it our fault? I'm having trouble believing that. We caused a revolution in Iran back in 1959 and destabilized that country eventually. That was our fault. We created some revolutions elsewhere, Salvador, Guatemala, but I'm not aware of us having had an effect in Venezuela in that regard. Cuba is different. I think personally, Howard, that we kept Fidel Castro in power much longer than he otherwise would have, because everything that went wrong in his country, he blamed on our embargo. And to some degree, I guess he was right. We should trade with Venezuela. We should show the world what the government of Venezuela is doing and how it's just inflicted a tragedy upon their people. But I'm not willing to blame our government with regard to what's going on today in Venezuela, unless there's things going on that I'm just unaware of. But it's a basket case, and it's probably inherently the wealthiest country in Latin America, but they've just turned their political situation and economic situation a self-inflicted wound. But I don't see that as being our fault. I do appreciate people spending Tuesdays with us, or if you're going to see it hereafter on YouTube, you can write in questions. You can go to judgejimgray.com and communicate with me through there. I will respond to any communications. If I don't know an answer, I'll grapple with it, but I'll simply tell you. But I really appreciate people's willingness to be able to discuss all of these various issues. Next week, we'll talk about healthcare. Lots to talk about there, free enterprise system and everything again. I don't want to take the wind out of our sails from that one, but then the last of the series, this is when we're beyond the halfway point here. We have 2 more to go. The last one will be comparing the free enterprise system as opposed to entitlements, and guess which I think that is far more successful. Entitlements are just a trap. Welfare is a trap. I'll quote again 2 weeks from today, Henry Ford, not my favorite person politically or socially. He was anti-Semitic as far as I understand it, but said something that everybody should understand, and libertarians understand this. Anyone that feels they can thrive by relying on the government should talk to the American Indian. I mean, that's basically all you have to say. It's a trap. So I care about people. I want them to thrive. So relying upon the government is just not the way to go. I would, however, and I got into some trouble in the Libertarian primary, I would have a safety net. I would have a level below which people would not be allowed to fall. And it's adopted from Milton Friedman, so I'm on solid ground there. But and then do away with all this other welfare stuff, have an incentive to earn the extra money, which is totally lacking in our welfare system today. So these are things that we'll talk about next week as well as 2 weeks from tonight. But I'll respond to any questions that you ask as best I can, just trying to galvanize these various discussions, because I think it's important. And we certainly are not seeing this in today's political world. You know, the Democrats are just, you're either with me or against me. And if you're with me, you're wonderful. And if you're not, you're evil. And the Republicans are doing exactly the same thing. Jo Jorgensen is talking sense. It's just that she's having trouble getting some traction, having people listen to her. But wouldn't it be nice to be able to vote for somebody instead of against somebody else? And here, of course, here in California, any vote is a wasted vote from my standpoint, unless you vote for Jo Jorgensen. Any vote for Trump is a wasted vote in this election, because Biden's going to win California no matter what you do, even to the extent that, why vote for Biden, because he's going to win anyway. Vote for the Libertarian. Vote for somebody you can be proud of, and that's kind of where we would go. So, Michael, we're getting a little bit close to the upper hour. We have any more questions? Is Howard still with us?
We have one more question from George, which is, what do you think about government contracting with organizations like Blackwater? What role do private contractors have in military action, intelligence gathering, etc.?
George, it's a complicated world. In a lot of ways, I don't know if you play bridge or not. I was raised playing bridge. It's a great card game. And the word there is, you know, after you bid and you you end up getting the contract, then somebody leads and then the dummy puts down all of his cards. The reason I'm bringing this up is that, like in bridge, in life, only a dummy puts all his cards on the table. There are a lot of bad things happening in the world. Blackwater is involved with a lot of dark things. Are we going to put all our cards on the table and say, no, we'll never do anything underhanded? That's naive. We have our standards. We should lead the world. We should be the city on the hill. We should show people, and this is why Guantanamo, for example, is just such a tragic thing that we're still perpetuating. Where is Donald Trump with regard to that? But we're trying to show that we are better than this, that we don't stoop to such things. We had a saying when I was in the federal prosecutor's office, in the U.S. Attorney's office in Los Angeles, working with snitches and people like that. If you get down in the gutter with dogs, you're going to get up with fleas. And it's true with regard to Blackwater, and they're involved with some nefarious types of things. Some of it, I guess, has to happen. Just ends justify the means. Be careful of that, because you can take yourself down into an area that you should not go. Otherwise, I'm not schooled enough. I'm not knowledgeable enough to know what Blackwater precisely is doing. We need civilian control over the military, over the CIA, over these various contractors. Do we need to contract with them? The answer is yes, to some degree. How much? Probably we're doing much more than we should be. Are they like Sikorsky, making money off wars and the rest of that? Yes. Is it necessary? I'm not knowledgeable enough to know, but I can tell you, if we were in office, we'd damn well find out, and we would reduce it to its logical minimum. But these are difficult issues, George, and I've kind of spoken as much as I think I know about it.
All right. Well, those are all the questions I have so far.
Well, Michael, let me ask you a question. Do you know the difference between a raven and a crow? We'll probably knock this off with this definition, but most people understand that ravens are somewhat larger than a crow, and scientifically, ravens have 5 pinion feathers in their tail, and a crow only has 4 pinion feathers in its tail. So the difference between a raven and a crow is a matter of opinion. I didn't hear any groans there, but it's the best I could do at almost 8 o'clock on a Tuesday evening. Again, Howard, I will send you, if you let us know which book you would like and an address, I will mail that to you. We sent one last week to Natalie and one the week before to Dr. Terry, I recall. So we will do it again next week. Please tune in again, talk to your friends. Michael will send you a link. Show that and share it with your friends. You know, let them see libertarian actions, libertarian values, libertarian approaches at work, because life is complicated, like we said, but we don't have all the answers, but the libertarian approaches work. Live and let live. Thomas Jefferson was a prototype from my standpoint of a libertarian, who once said, I don't care if you worship 1 God, 20 gods, or no God. It doesn't pick my pocket and it doesn't break my leg. That's pretty much live and let live. And that's pretty much where we are. Life is short. You should be able as an adult to live your life as you wish, as long as it does not wrongly affect the ability of other adults to do the same thing. And that's pretty much where we are. Live and let live is a good idea. And try to influence people, just like with your religious institutions or whatever, not by force, not by government. Government shouldn't be involved in those things. We should protect religion from government. We should protect government from religion. But you do that by your convincing of your argument. And that's what we should be out there doing as well. We should put accurate information into the marketplace, like we have not done with regard to COVID-19 and the rest. But we as libertarians, again, I think we're in the mainstream. We're the only ones that I know of that do not want to and would not profit by being involved with government. You know, our cronies wouldn't be receiving bailouts. Our cronies wouldn't be receiving extra payments. We'd just be open. We would be an open book, not dummies putting all our cards on the table. We're not naive. We're not isolationist. We're not going to, withdraw everything and pretend that we're alone in the world. But government has become so complicated. And I'll leave you with this following thought. I've castigated big government, but big government is really, really good and effective at one thing, and that is increasing the size, the cost, and the power of big government. It's gone on for decades, and we're the only game in town. We would shrink this. We would give back that authority to Congress, telling you we're not going to send our troops into battle zones more than 60 days without a declaration of war. We're going to have a rule of law. It's going to be enforced. Equal opportunity, equal justice for all. And I salute the American flag. We stand for this. We have actually another podcast coming, Michael, that you may not be aware of, but it's called Becoming America. America is a perfect idea. The United States of America is a work in progress. We're getting there. We'll be better tomorrow than we were yesterday. Let's work together to accomplish these. Thank you for sharing the evening with us. I appreciate that. Tune in again next week, and on next Tuesday, we'll talk about healthcare. This is Judge Jim Gray. Thank you again, George. Thank you, David. Thank you, Michael. We'll see you next week.
Oops. All right. Thank you very much.